You know, nowadays, Starship Troopers is considered by many to be a late 90s cult classic that combines excessive violence, nudity, and bad acting to form a meta, clever political satire. However, when the movie first came out, way back in 1997, audiences took a look at the movie and collectively said,
"I don't like it."
And to make matters worse, it was despised by critics, a financial disaster, and was considered so bad that Roger Ebert said this:
"Too repetitive for me, and I have to give a thumbs down."
So, what was it about Starship Troopers that made everyone hate it? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Are you doing your part?
I'm doing my part.
Well, then I've got a movie made just for you. Grab a gun and report for duty, folks, as we take a spoiler-heavy look at Starship Troopers.
I'm doing my part too.
So, Starship Troopers is the story of 35-year-old high school student Johnny Rico, his best friend Carl, his girlfriend Carmen, and his stalker Dizzy.
It's pretty clear what she wants.
As we are introduced to our cast of friends, we see them on their last day of school listening to their history teacher, Mr. Racksack, reciting some very provocative talking points.
Force, my friends, is violence, the supreme authority from which all other authority is derived.
My mother always said violence never solves anything.
Isn't your mother a well-known whore?
And by now, you're probably asking yourself, why does this sound like some sort of weird propaganda? Well, because it is. You see, this movie takes place in the 23rd century, where the nations of the world have reformed themselves into the United Citizen Federation, a semi-fascist one-world government where military service plays a vital role in shaping society.
I'm doing my part.
So much so that basic human rights, like voting, are only given to those who have completed a term of military service.
Service guarantees citizenship.
Anyway, political indoctrination aside, high school in the 23rd century is pretty much how it is now, where students make out in hallways, they go to football games, and they dissect bugs in biology class.
And now,
Here, take this.
And it's here, as everyone is getting a crash course in bug anatomy, that we learn about the Clandathans, a race of bug-like aliens who are an intergalactic threat to humanity.
they are relatively stupid, but their evolution stretches over millions of years.
Then, Carmen gives a review of The Last Jedi for some reason. With graduation rapidly approaching, because, again, these people are supposed to be in high school, everyone is contemplating what they want to do with the rest of their lives. Carl decides to join up with Army intelligence because of his psychic abilities, which I guess are a thing in the 23rd century, and Carmen wants to be a pilot.
I'm gonna be a pilot.
Because she's smart, I guess. But, like the old saying goes, you should never judge a book by its cover, because apparently, behind those dead eyes and plastic smile is the brain of a genius.
I'm gonna be a pilot.
But Johnny, on the other hand, is still not sure what he wants to do when he graduates, and instead is focusing all his time on playing sports. And it's here, during the final football game of the season, that we meet Xander, a student from an opposing school who is athletic, charming, and seems to like Carmen a lot, which causes him and Johnny to get into a bit of a scuffle.
Football!
But don't worry, I'm sure after the game is over, they'll both become really good friends. Later that night, at a post-game dance, everyone is having a great time. This backup singer looks confused, Neil Patrick Harris gets to pretend like he's attracted to a woman, and Johnny is able to get some advice from Mr. Racksack.
Figuring things out for yourself is the only freedom anyone really has. Use that freedom.
Words of wisdom that Johnny will promptly ignore when he decides to join the army so he can stay close to Carmen. But there's just one small problem.
35%. Very nice. Look at that.
He's kinda stupid, which means the only military position he's qualified for is in the Mobile Infantry, the tip of the Federation Army spear that is famous for taking high casualties.
Mobile Infantry made me the man I am today.
And just like that, high school is over, and everyone has to do their best to adjust in their new lives as Army cadets. We then cut to boot camp, where Johnny is having some trouble adjusting to military life. And it's here that we get to meet some members of Johnny's squad. There's Private Smith, Private Breckenridge, Private Katrina, Private Dejana,
Privates!
and Private Ace Levy, who is played by Jake Busey, the son of known psychopath Gary Busey.
Hello, Pants.
And speaking of psychopath, look who else decided to come along for the ride. That's right, it's Dizzy, who seems hell-bent on following Johnny everywhere he goes.
Hey, Rico, want to sit together?
No thanks, Diz.
Anyway, as most of you already know, life in the military is made up of a lot of repetitive routine, consisting of typical military stuff, like running on obstacle courses, throwing knives, and co-ed showers. We then get the chance to check in on Carmen, who has risen up the ranks pretty quickly and is now a cadet pilot on a Federation battlecruiser, where she spends most of her time doing what cadet pilots do, like smiling a lot, wearing her hair in unique and fun ways, and putting people's lives in danger on a daily basis.
Oh no, naughty bandit again! She's crazy!
Helping Carmen in her quest to prove that women aren't dangerous when operating heavy machinery is Xander.
We're good together, Carmen. I can anticipate you. You know what I want.
Back at boot camp, things are going pretty well for Johnny too. So good, in fact, that he manages to make squad leader. But sadly, Johnny's happiness is short-lived when he gets a message from Carmen telling him that she wants to break up so that she can focus on her career.
I think I'm gonna go career. I don't think that's gonna leave a lot of room for you and me, Johnny.
Jeez, what a bitch.
Then, to make matters worse, Johnny accidentally gets Private Breckenridge killed during a live fire exercise. And so, we say a sad farewell to Private Breckenridge. He may have been a big dumb idiot, but he will live forever in our hearts. Angry with himself, Johnny decides to drop out of the military and calls his parents, asking them if he can come back home. But then, the unthinkable happens. When suddenly and without warning, an asteroid destroys the city of Buenos Aires, killing millions of people, making this guy really angry,
The only good bug is a dead bug.
and causing Earth to mobilize the full might of its army to invade Klendathu, the home planet of the bugs where the asteroid came from.
Goddamn bugs whacked us, John.
Good.
Now, you're probably asking yourself, how are bugs, that we've been told are just mindless animals,
Human standards, they are relatively stupid.
able to throw an asteroid at a planet on the opposite side of the galaxy?
It just doesn't make sense.
Well, that's a good question. The movie greatly implies that this was a false flag, a conspiracy set up by the Federation to justify a full-on invasion of Klendathu. But unfortunately, Alex Jones won't be alive in the 23rd century. So, I guess we'll never know what actually happened.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
As the convoy of Federation ships makes its way to Klendathu, Johnny, Dizzy, and Ace, a man who has way too many teeth, decides to enjoy a night in their ship's food court, or whatever this is. But unfortunately, their fun is interrupted when Johnny runs into Carmen by accident, which eventually results in Johnny and Xander acting out their favorite WrestleMania moment. So now comes the moment that everyone's been training for, the invasion of Klendathu. And it's here that we get to see the full force of the Federation military in action, combined with age-old tactics that great military strategists have used for hundreds of years. Like, when invading enemy territory, don't use any air, heavy weapons, or armored support, just let the infantry take care of it. What's the worst that could happen?
Ace, what are we doing?
I don't know.
Remember to bunch up as tight as possible to maximize the amount of potential casualties you will take. And when engaging the enemy, make sure to use the least effective weapons as possible. Sadly, despite the combined wisdom of all these great military minds, the Federation suffers massive casualties, proving that the bugs are a lot smarter than everyone thought.
Frankly, I find the idea of a bug that thinks offensive.
Unfortunately, Johnny has been accidentally counted among the dead, but thankfully he's fine, recovering from his wounds in a tub of Mountain Dew. And it doesn't take long after bathing in this cool, refreshing beverage that contains 77 grams of sugar per serving that Johnny is back on his feet feet and ready to meet his new unit, the Roughnecks. And it's here that we meet a few more new characters because all the other ones are dead. And this new batch consists of Corporal Birdie, Detective Carter, and their commanding officer, Lieutenant Rackjack.
Everyone fights, no one quits.
After the disastrous Battle of Clendathu, the Federation High Command has decided to come up with a new battle strategy. They want to clear out the planets that surround Clendathu, establish bases on them, and then proceed with another invasion. Kind of like how the war in the Pacific was fought during World War II, but with fewer cases of diarrhea. And they achieve that by using the Air Force to bomb the surface of those planets and use the infantry to take care of survivors. As it turns out, this plan seems to work out pretty well. Now, yes, it's true, some people are still maimed or killed in terrible ways, but for the most part, things are working out okay. So much so that after Corporal Birdie's arm is melted off, and Johnny kills a large beetle with a grenade, Lieutenant Rackjack gives him a promotion.
I need a corporal. You're it until you're dead, or till I find somebody better.
Later that night, Rackjack then demands that everyone blow off steam by drinking kegs of beer, because, as we all know, soldiers getting drunk is always a great idea. However, Johnny and Dizzy have other plans. The next day, the Roughnecks are sent to another planet to check out a distress call that has been sent by a Federation outpost. And once again, Johnny gets a promotion because someone has been ripped apart by a bug. Once they reach the outpost, it becomes clear that something has gone terribly wrong. Everyone is dead, the place is a mess, and the general in charge has gone a tad crazy. So, Lieutenant Rackjack relies on his experience as a school teacher to help the general come to his senses.
We're all gonna die!
That is what we call a bitch slap.
After getting snapped out of his madness, the general tells them that bugs got into the radio operator's brain and forced him to send out the distress call so that more Federation troops would be lured into a trap. And it's here that we get the pleasure of hearing the greatest dialogue delivery ever captured on screen.
They sucked his brains out.
Realizing that it's a trap, they try to get the radio working so they can call for help, and the rest of the Roughnecks get ready to make their final stand against insurmountable odds, which, as I'm sure you've figured out by now, means that more people are brutally killed. The general is splattered by a dragonfly, Lieutenant Rackjack gets his legs cut off, and this guy can't keep his head on straight.
You know, a human can go on living for several hours after being decapitated.
You're thinking I'm a chicken.
What did I say?
Finally, after getting the radio working, the Roughnecks are able to call a dropship to evacuate them from the area, a call that Xander and Carmen are quick to answer. But before she can get to safety, Dizzy is fatally injured.
Just a flesh wound.
Back on the command ship, with most of their friends dead and their commanding officer killed, the Roughnecks decide to give Dizzy a proper funeral, which in this case means they stand at attention and watch her casket slowly drift into space. As they continue to watch Dizzy's body drift into the void of space, the funeral is interrupted by Carl, who is dressed like one of the Nazis from Indiana Jones, and he tells Johnny that he thinks the bugs are controlled by smart bugs, or as he calls them, brain bugs, and that the Roughnecks are being sent back down to the planet to find the brain bugs in order to turn the tides of war. So, once again, the Roughnecks head out on a new mission. The bugs, on the other hand, have a different plan, and as the Roughnecks begin their bug hunt, the bugs respond with a plasma attack on the Federation fleet. An attack that causes Carmen's ship to take a direct hit, killing the captain and sucking crewmen into space. Luckily, Carmen and Xander are able to escape before the ship explodes. But while doing so, their escape pod takes damage. They have to crash land, and they find themselves in a very bad situation, surrounded by bugs.
Can anything save them?
Strangely, however, the bugs decide to not kill them. Instead, they keep them alive so they can become victims of the brain bug. which is essentially a giant tick vagina that is so fat it can't move on its own, and it uses a stinger to suck people's brains out, which is exactly what it does to Xander, finally making him and Carmen intellectually equal.
I'm gonna be a pilot.
Before it can penetrate the hollow void of Carmen's skull, Johnny, Ace, and Detective Carver show up with a miniature nuclear weapon, which I guess is a thing in the 23rd century, and demand that Carmen be let go, or they will kill every bug in the blast radius. A threat that the brain bug understands because of all the brains that it sucked out of people, I guess? I'm not really sure how that works. I mean, there are people who eat cow brains, and as far as I know, they don't have any deep insight into the life of cows, but whatever. Anyway, after the brain bug makes it to safety, the rest of the bugs attack, resulting in Detective Carver getting mortally wounded. However, in one last heroic act, he detonates the miniature nuke as Johnny, Carmen, and Ace barely make it out alive. As they make their way back to the planet's surface, they are all surprised to see that another brain bug has actually been captured. Carl tells everyone that the bug is afraid.
It's afraid!
The war effort is given new life, and the Federation fight continues to stop the spread of bugs across the galaxy.
Come on, you apes! You wanna live forever!
And that's it. The movie's over. And when it's all said and done, the movie that we end up with is full of over-the-top dialogue, extreme violence, gratuitous nudity, and some pretty awful acting. However, beneath that grimy surface is a movie that actually has a lot to say, by using those things that I just mentioned in order to critique fascism, blind patriotism, and the glorification of war, while at the same time is one of the most fun movies that you will ever see. Now, when I say over-the-top dialogue, I'm not being hyperbolic. There are times that what people are saying is just objectively ridiculous, like this.
They sucked his brains out.
The only good bug is a dead bug.
But luckily, you have legendary character actors like Michael Ironside, Clancy Brown, and others, so no matter how crazy the dialogue gets, it still works. However, with their awesome acting also comes some acting that's pretty rough. Because I have a soft spot for this movie, and by extension the actors involved, I don't want to be too harsh, but let's face it, Casper Van Dien, who plays Johnny, isn't exactly setting the world on fire with his performance. Most of the time, he comes off very dry, struggling to achieve any inflection or any type of natural rhythm to his dialogue, especially when it comes to the love scenes.
You two have so much in common.
He just always looks uncomfortable, like he's struggling to remember what he's supposed to say after his scene partner is done with their lines.
You're not going back, you're going on vacation.
I am not going on vacation.
Then there's Denise Richards. Everything I just said about Casper Van Dien is amplified by orders of magnitude when it comes to her acting. God bless her, I'm sure she was trying her best, but if you're old enough to remember the height of her career, then you know she was only in movies for 2 reasons, none of which were her acting abilities.
Just give me 3.5 minutes. Maybe even 4.
Patrick Harris as Carl is fine. I mean, he's not really in the movie a lot, but when he shows up, I don't have any issues with what he's doing. He just doesn't have that much to do. The one bright spot, in the principal cast anyway, is Dina Meyer, who plays Dizzy. Now, it does take some time for her character to become interesting because during all the high school stuff, she's just constantly throwing herself at Johnny, and honestly, it's just kind of pathetic. But once they get to boot camp and she isn't preoccupied with getting in Johnny's pants, she becomes one of, if not the most interesting character in the movie. Well, that is until Michael Ironside shows back up anyway.
Everyone fights, no one quits.
The movie is also incredibly violent, but in the absolute best way possible. Throughout the movie, we get the pleasure of seeing people ripped apart, impaled, blown up, shot, stabbed, crushed, get their heads cut off, melted by fire. We even get to see a guy's brain get sucked out of his head. It's so violent, in fact, I'm not sure that YouTube will even allow me to show it to you, which is why I've tried to keep those moments to a minimum during the review. But just trust me, behind this black bar, there are just terrible things happening.
Medic!
And by now, you're probably asking yourself, if you like it so much, then why was it considered bad way back in 1997? Well, that's mostly because people just didn't understand it. And the only way to understand it is to first understand its director, Paul Verhoeven. He's the same guy that made RoboCop and Total Recall, both of which did the same things that Starship Troopers was criticized for, to critique capitalism, corporate greed, and consumerism. And that's what he's doing with this movie as well. But in 1997, there just wasn't much interest in seeing a meta-political satire, which is what this movie is. You see, Starship Troopers is a propaganda film made by the United Citizen Federation to recruit you, the audience, in their fight against the bugs. There are even advertisements peppered throughout the movie to remind the audience to stay vigilant during the war effort, much like radio shows and movie house serials used to do during the Second World War.
Invest in war-saving certificates today.
But when the general public heard of a movie about a semi-fascist one-world government trying to use its massive military-industrial complex to fight a space war, they were a bit turned off because they were expecting a more conventional action film, which isn't their fault, by the way. If you watch the original trailer of the movie, you'll see that a more conventional action film is exactly what the studio was marketing this movie as.
Kid, what's going on? War! We're going to war!
Now the youth of tomorrow must travel across the stars to defend our world.
It's really only been in the last decade or so, and more recently with the release of Helldivers 2, that the movie has started to be appreciated for what it is. If you've seen the movie before, then I recommend that you see it again, because the experience will still be as good as it was the first time you saw it. And if you haven't seen it, I really think that you should. You can find it on Netflix, although you can't watch it on the $9.99 plan. I don't know why. And it's available for purchase on just about any other streaming platform. Give it a shot. I don't think you'll be disappointed.